Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Now we go to our last chapter, chapter 7, which is planning of health promotion. Okay, for our first slide is planning a health promotion program. Point number one is health educators' responsibilities are involved in some way with program planning. They need to program planning, implement, they need to implement, and the last one is they need to evaluate. Plan, implement, jalankan, and then evaluate the result of your program. And point number two is all approaches for health promotion program generally include assessing the needs of the target population. Number two is identifying the problem. Number three is developing appropriate goal and objective. Next is creating an intervention that consider the peculiarities of the setting. Next is implementing the intervention, and the last one is evaluating the result. You need to evaluate. Next slide is a good health promotion programs are not created by chance. They are product of much effort and should be based on well-developed model. Remember model. So in this topic, we know what type of model that you can follow when you want to plan any health promotion. Okey, sebelum saya sambung, saya tutup kamera sebab anak buah saya dah sampai. Jadi terganggu sikit lah kalau saya buat ada video dan saya buat kat bawah. Okay, we continue tanpa gambar, tanpa video. Okay, planning of health promotion program. Next point is important of using model for planning a program. Model are mean by which planner gives structure and organization to the program process. Number two is model provide planner with direction and supply a frame on which to build. Next is no perfect model yet exists. However, each one has its own strength and weakness. Most of the model can be classified as attitude model. So, di sini berdasarkan model yang saya cakap slide sebelum ni, berdasarkan model tu akan jadi guideline for us to develop health promotion program. Next slide. Next point is there are many type of planning model for health education promotion. We have PRECEDE, PRECEDE by Green et al. And then PRECEDE, or we change it to PROCEED, recording by Green and Critter 1991. And then MHEP, created by Ross and Miko 1980. Then James CHEM by Sullivan 1973. And then is MHEPRD by Betts and Winder 1984. Next is GHFDS by Patton et al. 1986. Next is PATCH, PATCH, also by Green and Critter 1999, and CDC 1983. And our last point is the best known model most often used in health promotion is original PRECEDE, and lately the PRECEDE PROCEED framework. Maksud dia, kita akan fokuskan dengan dua model ni sahaja in this topic. Next slide. PRECEDE, developed by Green, Critter, Ditt and Petrich 1980. PRECEDE was acronym from predisposing, reinforce, enabling, cause in education, diagnose and evaluation. That is acronym for PRECEDE. Next is the framework based, according to PRECEDE, the framework based on the requirement of 4 disciplines. Number 1 is epidemiology. Number 2 is social behavioral science. Number 3 is administration. And the last one is education. Next is it consists of 7 phases. Phase number 1 is social diagnosis. Number 2 is epidemiological diagnosis. Number 3 is behavioral diagnosis. Next is educational diagnosis. Next is administrative diagnosis. And the last one is evaluation. Now we go phase by phase. The first phase is social diagnosis. Is an assessment of the quality of life, QOL. Planner use appropriate need assessment techniques to determine the quality of life as defined by social problem in target population, in legitimacy, welfare, unemployed, absenteeism, and crime. So we need to assess the quality of life. Kita assess, kita diagnose macam mana status sosial sesuatu tempat kita nak buat program tu. Next phase is epidemiological diagnosis. After we go for social diagnosis, planner use epidemiological data to determine what specific health problem were contributing to social problem identified in phase 1. Phase 1 tadi, apa phase 1 tadi kalau ingat? Iaitu social diagnosis. Apa yang kita boleh identify adalah morbidity, mortality and fertility. The third phase is behavioral diagnosis, is to identify those specific health-related behavior that seem to be associated with prioritized health problem in phase 2. Contoh dia obesity. Dekat tu kita identify the disease is obesity. So in behavioral diagnosis, we will know apa yang diorang makan, macam mana diorang food intake diorang, that is in this phase. Next phase is educational diagnosis. Planner try to assess the cause of the health behavior by identifying, sorting, and categorizing 3 classes of factors that have potential to affect health behavior. Factor number 1 is predisposing factors, which is attitude, value, belief, and knowledge. For example, ni contoh dia. Contoh dia adalah smoking. They feel cool, that is belief. Accepted by peers, that is value. And danger, that is knowledge about smoking. Next factor is enabling factor. Reward or encouraging feedback, positive or negative. For example, smoking lagi. Smoking encouragement by peers but can be positive influence by non-smoking role model. Maksudnya kita pakai popular athlete. Di sini dia letak contoh popular athlete to encourage them to become a non-smoking. Then, the last factor is reinforcing factor. Resource and skill needed for behavior change. Exercise, safe and convenient place. Improper exercise can cause muscle soreness and injury. Contoh dia untuk exercise. Ni tadi. Ni contoh untuk exercise. And how about smoking? Smoking, kalau smoking tadi kita jadikan contoh sebagai our third factor, what we can do? We can prepare them, ubat untuk berhenti merokok, macam tu. Kita bagi kesan-kesan dia, bagi ajar dia macam mana. We are reinforcing apa yang kita boleh buat untuk educate them. And next slide is precede or proceed yang telah diubah suai by Green and Critter. They've been updated and improved berdasarkan model yang pertama tadi. Okay, point number 1 here is one of most widely used health assessment and planning model. Proceed stand for policy, regulatory, and organizational construct in educational and environmental development. Next slide. Precede or proceed contain 9 phases. Yang tadi, precede tadi, dia ada berapa phase? 7 phase. But in precede and proceed, we have 9 phases. The first one is social assessment. Number 2 is epidemiological assessment. Number 3 is behavioral and environmental assessment. Next is educational and ecological assessment. Next is administrative and policy assessment, next is implementation, next is process evaluation, next is impact evaluation, and the last one is outcome evaluation. They are slightly different with the first model. Next slide, we go phase by phase. The first phase is social assessment, is to identify social indicator that reflect target population with quality of life. And phase number 2 is epidemiological assessment. Data are collected to determine the incidence and prevalence of community health problems that affect the community quality of life. And the second point here is communicable disease, measure measles and hepatitis, chronic disease such as cancer and heart disease, health-related risk factor, malnutrition, anemia, and hypertension, and other recognized health problems, which is domestic violence and adolescent pregnancy. So in this phase, we identify type of disease there. Next phase is behavioral and environmental assessment. Specific behavior and environmental factors that contribute to the target health problems are identified and prioritized. Sama macam yang model sebelum ni juga. Kenal pasti apa behavior dia menyebabkan dia berpenyakit tu. Contoh tadi obes kan, tengok balik macam mana pemakanan dia. And next phase is educational and ecological assessment, composed of predisposing, reinforcing, and enabling factor. Sama dengan yang first model tadi. Next phase is administrative and policy assessment, is to assess and resources needed to develop and implement the HE program. Next is to compare the need with the available resource in the community. For example, time, personnel and budget. Identify community asset and capacity. Next is to assess barrier to implementation. For example, staff commitment and attitude or community concern. And the last one is policy assessment, local, politic, and organizational systems that may influence program when you want to implement. Next phase, after you assess all those needed in our previous phase or previous slide, you go for implementation, which is planners select the method and strategies of the intervention. After you implement, you will evaluate your event. After you evaluate your event, the next phase is you see, is there any impact on your event? Contoh yang merokok tadi, berkurang tak orang yang merokok di sana? Macam tu. And then the last one is outcome evaluation. Kamu tengok outcome dia ada perubahan tak untuk jangka masa panjang. That is outcome evaluation. So I think that's all for today class. I hope slide chapter 7 ni boleh membantu awak untuk tahu hala tuju awak, macam mana awak nak buat health promotion program macam assignment yang dah kena bagi tu, yang latest tu. I think that's all. See you when I see you. If you have any question, you may ask me. I think that's all. See you when I see you. Dan satu lagi, saya minta maaf sebab tak ada video. Sebab dah ada anak buah saya dekat rumah ni. Sejak PKP tu baru dia balik hari ni.